Welcome to the California Maverick, a channel fighting for a free and sane California. So some big news happened in Sacramento last week. On June 30th, 2025, Governor Gavin Newsom signed Assembly Bill 130 and Senate Bill 131. It has been touted as major reforms to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, a 1970 law enacted during heightened environmental awareness, signed by then Governor Ronald Reagan. Newsom strong-armed the California legislature by not approving the state's budget until resolutions were put on his desk to address California's housing crisis. But do Senate Bill 131 and Assembly Bill 130 actually deliver the transformative reform and overhaul claimed by Sacramento politicians and the California media? Let's get into it. When Governor Ronald Reagan in 1970 signed CEQA, it was initially a 10 to 12 page law that required a thorough review of any proposed developments for their environmental impacts and the adoption of measures to reduce or eliminate those impacts. But now, CEQA has been weaponized by environmental groups and labor unions to achieve their own goals and agendas. On top of CEQA being used as a weapon, it has also become a bureaucratic monster that has been a major contributor to California's housing shortage. It's gotten so bad that according to the California Department of Community Housing and Development, California needs roughly 2 million homes to meet the demand. What's even more shocking is that after the Palisades and Malibu fires, Governor Newsom and Karen Bass promised to cut all the red tape and all the regulations for the victims of those fires. But as of right now, only 6 out of 16,000 homes have been rebuilt, and only 14% have permits. This legislation, signed last week, admits openly that there is overregulation and government bureaucratic overreach. California politicians won't openly admit it or say it, but their actions prove it.
They've done it for stadiums, they've done it for climate projects, they've even done it for their own office building that's under construction just a couple of blocks away from here. And tonight, California lawmakers and the governor did it for housing. The governor and state lawmakers changing parts of the California Environmental Quality Act to get more homes built in the state. Signing off on what supporters say is one of the most significant changes to state law with the goal of more housing.
Today is a big deal. This is, and I can humbly say this, as someone who's been a student of this and a practitioner of sorts in the last 6+ years, the most consequential housing reform that we've seen in modern history in the state of California. Long overdue, absolutely.
Governor Gavin Newsom and Democratic lawmakers said for too long the California Environmental Quality Act has been weaponized, allowing lawsuits to slow or stop housing across the state. With Monday's action, for example, a new apartment building in Sacramento would be shielded from that moving forward. Supporters said the changes are key to address the state's housing shortage and affordability crisis. I asked, how soon could we see more housing?
To me, the goal is set up the right structure for the long term. This isn't about what's going to happen necessarily in the next year or 3 years. It's about decades to come. And when the economic conditions are right to build a ton of housing, that we want to make sure that the structure is there to facilitate that.
So are these new laws a historic reform of CEQA? No, they're not. Assembly Bill 130 and Senate Bill 131 that Gavin Newsom signed are more of an exemption instead of actual reform. And here's why. It only applies to infill housing projects, most of which are in the inner city and urban areas. A lot of these projects will be multi-use housing units, meaning retail spaces on the floor and apartments on the top floors, or just regular apartments. These won't be multifamily homes like duplexes, and these exemptions will not apply to single-family homes at all in rural or suburban areas. And just for clarification, an infill location is an underused or vacant land within existing urban or suburban areas, surrounded by established buildings and infrastructure. Put simply, housing built in and around existing development, but only in urban areas. So this is what the true agenda is behind these two bills and this so-called CEQA reform, in my opinion. The Sacramento politicians want to have a permanent voter base crammed into these downtown areas. They want you paying taxes. They don't want you driving around. and they want to use you to continue to get them reelected. That's the whole purpose. I'm a lifelong Californian. I've worked in downtown areas up and down the state. I've seen the reality of the urban decline firsthand because currently I work in downtown Sacramento. And Sacramento, for example, is plagued by empty storefronts, homelessness, drug addiction, crime all over the streets. I walk through it 2 to 3 times a week. Businesses in downtown are constantly complaining that they don't get enough traffic, that they don't get enough business. They're struggling to stay open, or they just closed. Near the building where I work, in a span of 5 months, I've seen 5 or 6 businesses shut their doors, and now they're just empty, vacant storefronts. And going back to the not driving, there are a ton of bike lanes in downtown Sacramento because they're required. Anytime there's buildings or new development, it's city code to have bike lanes. No one uses them. The only people that use those bike lanes are homeless on their bikes. It's the only people that use them. It's empty. It's all about power. It's all about money. And that's really the only reason why they implemented this bill. Because if it was really about affordability, it wouldn't just be in the urban areas. And let's get into affordability. Because one of the major critiques of these bills is requiring developers to hire unions. Now, I just want to clarify this because a lot of conservative news and politicians and pundits say that the bills require developers to use unions. That actually isn't true because the bills don't explicitly mention the use of unions. However, they do mandate prevailing wages. Prevailing wages are state set rates that only union companies can actually afford. And because they require prevailing wages, that means only unions can actually work on these projects. And that eliminates 75 to 80% of non-union construction firms. However you feel about unions is irrelevant. You're completely eliminating competition and dictating who can actually work on these projects instead of letting the free market decide. Let's take single-family homes, for example. Union-driven prevailing wages add, at minimum, $50,000 per single-family home, up to $100,000, depending on the size and the project. Now take that with a project like a multi-storied, 8 or 9-storied apartment or a multi-use facility with housing. It's millions of dollars added. And what I find incredibly ironic about this whole thing is that when these bills were passed, a ton of these unions were protesting these bills. And it's these very same unions that used these CEQA laws to file lawsuits so they can actually get the bid. It's well known, and California legislators openly admit that unions and environmental groups have weaponized CEQA. These unions file lawsuits, go to the developers and say, hey, we can tie you up for months or years with this lawsuit, costing you thousands and millions of dollars, or you can just give us the job and it'll go away. That happens all the time. A lot of developers too, they just abandon the projects entirely because they don't want to deal with it. It's not worth the headache and hassle. It's not worth the investment. So now come to think about it, I actually know why these unions protested these bills, because they're going to actually have to compete for bids, but only with other unions. They don't have the weapon of basically blackmailing these developers using lawsuits. And what's crazy is that a significant provision was snuck into SB 131, and that is the blanket CEQA exemption for the high-speed rail. A lot of the issues with the high-speed rail are tied to these environmental regulations because a lot of the high-speed rail was supposed to and currently runs through what are considered wetlands. The problem is that it's still not going to San Francisco. It's still not going to Los Angeles. It's Merced to Bakersfield. It's a pointless project. It's a pointless high-speed rail that no one's going to ride. And the budget is slated to give $7 billion to this high-speed rail to really nowhere. No disrespect to Bakersfield and Merced, but that is rural farmland country. And it's completely out of the way from San Francisco to LA. Not to mention, it's supposed to be in Sacramento this year, and that's not going to happen. And not a single bit of track has been laid yet, and it's been 16 years. The high-speed rail has become a running joke. and is a total disaster and a complete money pit. And what's just as frustrating about all these hidden agendas is the media. The media here in California claims that these bills are the holy grail of CEQA reform. That's a complete lie, because CEQA still remains in place for most of California. The suburban and rural areas will still have strict regulations. And the crazy thing is that's where people actually want to live. Californians want homes. They want single family homes in a safe neighborhood, especially those who want to raise children. They want a nice backyard. They want a place they can raise their kids. They don't want to live in downtown in a condo or in a multiplex apartment that has no backyard, full of traffic, homeless, crime, drugs. They don't want that. So all this to say is, I'm not really sure what the impact of these bills will be. Only time will tell. But California Senator Scott Weiner, who co-authored the bills, even said it could take 2 or 3 years to even start building. Even if we started building now, we wouldn't be able to feel the effects for another couple years. The only immediate effect that this has is current projects being built. So maybe in 6, 7, 8 years, urban rents in cities like Sacramento, maybe San Francisco or Oakland might dip slightly, but significant housing relief, especially for suburban or rural housing and single family or multifamily homes, is very unlikely. I don't think that's going to happen. So I genuinely think the main reason for these bills is optics. Newsom wants to run for president in 2028, and the primary is coming soon. His term as governor is over. You have Senator Scott Weiner, who's eyeing Nancy Pelosi's congressional seat. So you know the two of them, especially Newsom, is going to brag about how he signed historic housing reform, and no other governor in California has done what he's done to help lower income and people of color to be able to afford housing in California. Because if they really wanted to actually help people, they would have done it years ago. Because these very same exemptions were used for the Golden One Arena in downtown Sacramento, the Los Angeles Stadium that was recently built, the 49er Stadium in Santa Clara, and many, many other projects. What they really should do is either cut back CEQA back to its 1970s form when it was originally signed by Ronald Reagan, so that way you still have environmentally conscious building, or they should just eliminate it completely. The only way California can have truly affordable housing is to let the housing market, the free market, decide. The people and consumers of California should have the freedom to decide what to build, where to build, and who they want to hire to build. Not bureaucrats, politicians, or unions dictating the housing market. That's not solving the housing crisis or the housing problem at all. But anyway, that's all I got. Share your thoughts below. I'm going to have an in-depth video on the history of CEQA at the end. If you like this video, leave a like, share, and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.